The Bear Essentials podcast gives older bears a place to gather for real talk regarding topics and issues that they can relate to. Here at The Bear Essentials, we aren't just having conversations. We are looking to provide actionable intelligence through real-life experience and expertise of our guests. Our mission is to build a strong community that elevates and motivates people to go beyond their limiting beliefs by helping them realize that getting older is not an excuse to hibernate on their goals, but a reason to work harder.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Charles Wallace. Today's guest served his country as a member of the United States Marine Corps, and he continues to serve his community as he has been a law enforcement officer for over 20 years. And he's doing his very best to spread a message of positivity and help people smile about life. So without further ado, let's jump right into my interview with Banning Sweatland. But first, a word from our sponsor. The Bear Essentials podcast is sponsored by Fire Beast Jerky. With flavors ranging from tropical flair to sweet reaper, Fire Beast has something for all jerky lovers. And with over 30 years of experience making small batch, big flavor jerky, Fire Beast is sure to deliver quality, affordable jerky directly to your doorstep anywhere in America. So head on over to firebeastjerky.com and be sure to use code BEAR10 at checkout and receive 10% off your order from Fire Beast, the heat that is sweet. Hey, Banning, thanks for joining. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, sir. I appreciate the invite to come on your show.
Oh, man, the privilege. It's a privilege for me to have you on. I'm a huge supporter of police and military. I can't thank you all enough for what you guys do and what you put at risk. So thank you for that right up front. Could you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Absolutely. My name is Banning Sweatland. I currently work in North Texas as a county deputy sheriff. I've been in law enforcement now for 21 years. And before getting into law enforcement, I spent 4 years in the United States Marine Corps.
So, Banning, based on that, I guess I'll just start with this actually. So has wanting to serve others, has that been something that you've always wanted to do even from a younger age, or was it something that you kind of grew into?
It was the earliest memory I had of wanting to serve or at least be in law enforcement was around 5 or 6 years old, and recall myself writing my grandmother's citations for vacuuming too fast out in Big Spring, Texas, thinking that law enforcement was going to be my gig, not knowing that I would actually get into it, but I sure enough did. My family always reminds me it was a reunion that we were having, or a Christmas gathering, when I did the citing her for vacuuming too fast. Obviously, it was a joke on my side, but it kind of stuck with me throughout these years, and I'm constantly reminded of that day. But yes, a very, very early age that I wanted to get into law enforcement. I'm so glad that I stayed with that dream. All
right, so I have to ask you, are those tickets outstanding, or did you pay up?
She took care of those in the hole within a day or so.
Nice. Well, and now I'm surprised you didn't cut her a break being your grandmother, but I guess, hey, you break the law, you have to pay the price, right, man?
You bet.
That's fantastic. So as far as the military, what did you go in right out of high school? Were you young when you went in the military?
I did. So I went to basic training. I went to Parris Island in the Marine Corps. I was recruited east of the Mississippi. 3 days after high school graduation is when I went to MEPS, got everything done, and shipped off to Parris Island. So there was absolutely no break. I knew at that time in my life that the college wasn't for me, and I pretty much needed a filler between high school and 21 years of age to become a police officer. And I thought, nothing better than to serve our country. Not really knowing what the Marine Corps was all about until I got there. Wanting to serve our country until I was old enough to take a role in law enforcement.
So, Banning, as far as your military service, where did you end up? Were you overseas? What?
So basically, when I went in, I joined as they laid out a deal in front of me. The recruiter did, and he said, they have hundreds of jobs on there. What do you want? He said, due to your ASVAB score, you can pretty much, take what position you want, as long as you can get through that training of whatever it is. And I said, well, what's the hardest right now? And I had this big thing I think I was trying to prove things to myself and to other people that since I wasn't going to college, I could do a hard role in the military. Well, you told me that Marine Corps Security Force Company was a high washout rate. So I ended up going to Marine Corps Security Force Company, which it's up in Chesapeake, Virginia, where the training is at. And then I was actually stationed stateside my entire tour. So I don't have any hero missions of going overseas over in the sandbox and doing anything. I was in during peacetime. Mm-hmm. So I got out 2 weeks before the towers got hit. I got a lot of really neat training that was able to transition for me into law enforcement, and I'm able to take that training and implement that on new officers that whoever I train. So no amazing stories or anything like that.
No, I mean just doing what you did. Can we talk? I want to touch on one thing though. You said you were looking for the hardest thing to do, and that's I literally I have a lot of people on. We talk about mindset and things like that. So
sure.
When you're in law enforcement trying to, help teach others, things like that, is mindset, is it something that you've always carried with you from that training that you're really trying to instill in others and push them to do harder things?
It is. I got to experience early on in my law enforcement career that if you don't have the proper mindset and you go into a stressful situation, there's a lot of things that your body's not going to pick up on, from hearing to seeing, movements from people. If you don't have the right mindset and you're not there 100%, it can really mess with you in the moment and possibly get you injured, or you being a law enforcement officer injuring somebody else. So absolutely, mindset is absolute key. And I did learn a lot of mindset in the Marine Corps. However, I developed my own thought process, if you will, for going to a priority one call. That's hard to transition to another person. However, I just tell them what I do on the way to the call that helps me cope with what may or what's about to happen to help me take care of that stress.
I want to unpack that a little bit because it's something interesting you said. So even for me, when I think about mindset, and I think for most people, when we talk about mindset, we think about just the real gritty part of it, right? Like having that mindset that you're able to do hard things and things like that. You touched on something there that I don't think people really connect with mindset. And it was more about just, I would say, like an overall thing, right? You mentioned some things about having a mindset for the situation, right? Like, I think, could you jump into that a little more? Like when you say that, it doesn't sound to me like it's just this gritty, tough mindset. There's more to it. And could you explain that a little more?
Sure. So I'm definitely not a doctor or a psychiatrist, psychologist, but I know about my body to be able to operate efficiently. I've got to be able to have enough oxygen on board. Obviously, you have to feed a machine, you have to fuel a machine, do what you have to do. But if you don't have enough oxygen on board, things are going to start shutting down. So when I have rookies and I'm doing certain sets of training in an abandoned building, if we're doing active shooter scenarios or just any priority one type call to where your body's going to go into fight or flight, I can sit there and physically see when that switch flips inside of a rookie to where they are no longer taking anything in audibly. They're not putting anything out verbally. They've gone into essentially fight or flight, and they're a sitting duck. I mean, there's so many different names you could call it. But what I personally use is if I know that I'm going to a bad situation, an example, dispatch is sending you to a family violence call or a family domestic, and they're telling you that weapons are involved, the neighbors are reporting people hearing hits or people up against the wall, or maybe sometimes we've gone to these to where, you're hearing gunshots. So you're obviously going to something that you may not make it home to if you don't play your cards right and use all the training that you've received within your law enforcement career. So what I do is, and I'm going to tell you, I hate the use of this name, but tactical breathing. So you have box breathing or tactical breathing, and that's something to where for your listeners and people that are watching this, hundreds of different free apps on Apple, all the different app stores that you can go to. I mean, you don't have to pay for it, but it teaches you how to control your breathing, to reoxygenate your body. And what it's going to do, it's going to lower your blood pressure. It's going to lower your heart rate. And once you do all that, you're going to regain your fine motor skills. And obviously, as a law enforcement officer, you may or may not have to retrieve your firearm in a bad situation, or use a taser, or go what I call hands-on with somebody to control their movements, to not hurt themselves anymore, or hurt anybody else. And you need those fine motor skills, and you have to be able to communicate with people. And we have to make sure we do it without hurting them. So when you do box breathing and tactical breathing on a way to a certain situation, it's going to keep all that stuff lower. You're going to be a much calmer person when you get on scene. When you're speaking on the radio, you're a lot more cool, collect. People can understand you, and people that are running to you hear you're calm within the storm, and they're going to slow their roll a little bit and get there safer, and they're going to be calmer. I've been doing this for 21 years. I've seen both sides of that coin several times. And I'm going to tell you, box breathing, tactical breathing, whatever you want to call it, is my medicine, if you will, to keep people calm in a bad situation.
Man, I think that's such valuable advice, even for banning, as you're saying, and I'm sitting here thinking of just people outside of law enforcement, right? Just in our everyday lives, right? Like,
sure.
We all encounter situations every day where I feel that could come in handy. It doesn't have to be, law enforcement, military. That could really, really come in handy, I believe. And you said a couple other things there that I definitely want to talk about. And the one that stuck out with me is, and I mean, I'll just say it. I mean, I've never met you in person, but you're obviously a big man. You're much bigger than myself, but the fact that, I would assume, like, somebody sees you, maybe they're more willing to comply, right? But the fact that you state right off the bat, like, we don't want to hurt anybody. Is that something that you've really carried on with you from the beginning? Because I do think certain times it's unfortunate, right? There's probably people who join police force that they're more in it to, I'll say it, they're out there to kick ass, right? That's what they want to do. Hearing somebody like you with the calmness and the level-headedness say that, I mean, is that something you're doing yourself, obviously, but you're really trying to get across to anyone you're training?
It is. Even in high school. So I went to many different schools growing up. I grew up all over this country, and I'm thankful for that. I believe it makes me more worldly and learned a lot. And every time I came into a new school, I have bright red hair, 6 feet tall, around 300 pounds. So whoever your big athletic guy, or I'm going to say it, girl, that kind of was the bully or whatnot in the school system, they saw me come in, and sometimes they would look at me as a threat. Even though I'm not doing anything to provoke them. I'm coming to school and going home. I try to, or athletics or whatever it was. So it seems like I was challenged in several different schools growing up. It stopped getting into high school. Guys and gals just didn't challenge me as much then, and I'm thankful for them that they didn't. I hate hurting somebody. That's the last thing I want to do. But yes, anytime I'm training officers that come to me for training, it's we can do so much more with our mind and our mouth and our heart without the brawn. I mean, obviously, it's good to be in shape. It's nice to be able to bench X amount of weight or cling a whole bunch of weight off the ground. I've had to rip people out of a driver's seat, not for taking them to jail because their car is on fire, and yes, I've had to do it for taking them to jail too. But the last thing I want to do is hurt somebody. But reaching across the driver's plane, or what's called the V pillar in a car, cutting somebody's seatbelt and jerking them out. I mean, you've got to be on your A game. For one, you've got to have your back in shape, and you got to work out quite frequently, and cardio in shape to be able to do that. So it helps to be in shape doing this job. But when it actually comes down to, quote unquote, talking somebody off the ledge, your mouth, whatever psychology you've learned growing up, in your home situation is really going to help you. I've talked to people out of fights a lot more than I've been in them. And I've been in a ton of fights in my law enforcement career, after somebody else has started at law enforcement or at a third party, innocent person, and we have to end that threat. And I hate to word it that way, but you have to, because that's why we're there to do, is we're to end the threat and create peace. So if you just treat somebody like a human being, like you want to be treated, and they're cognizant, and they can hear you, and they don't have drugs on board or a lot of alcohol, and they're willing to listen, I mean, you can get a lot solved with just with this and this, and using your head. But yes, it's, that they call it in the news, what is it? De-escalation. And yeah, I've been de-escalating people for years, and not just me. Thousands of law enforcement officers across this country do exactly what I do every day.
Yeah, and that was the next thing I wanted to ask you. You led right into it. Like, you're a pro at this. You do a lot of these banning.
I do video podcasts from time to time. Yes, sir.
Well, thanks for the segue. So the other thing I want to talk to you about was communication skills. Like, I think that's something that I don't think people realize how important that is for law enforcement. And I think you touched on it some, but I mean, I almost think that's another tool in your toolkit that is probably used more often than most.
You bet. And so communication, bar none, like I said, doing this for over 20 years now is in a hole. So how does law enforcement get involved with things when they're on duty? And I can just speak to you from being in it, where we either see something, we have to intervene, and let the course go through, from either processing somebody into jail, or if it's a lost child, we're getting flagged down by a parent, we have to get canine on scene and setting up a perimeter. And this all comes back to that communication. What tools do I have available with the department that I'm at the time that I can deploy in a timely manner to either catch somebody and bring them before a judge, or find a child, depending on the temperature, and get them to the hospital. So communication is key, but that's also a full circle. A good friend of mine once told me, he said, "Banning, what does the dispatcher say when you call 911?" Well, personally, I've maybe called 911 3 times in my life when I was off duty, reporting a drunk driver in front of me, or a fight that maybe my wife and I had witnessed, and we're trying to get law enforcement there to stop somebody getting hurt. But that communication from the caller to the dispatcher to the officer, or to any other first responder out there. So the dispatcher has to be able to ask the right questions. And I'm not sure about the state that you're in, but here in Texas, dispatchers are finally privileged with being called first responders. So for many, many years, they were in the same classification as a taxi cab dispatcher in the city of New York. That's how legislators looked at 911 dispatchers. Well, at least in Texas, and I think we're leading the way on it, they're actually classifying them as first responders. There's a lot of them that do EMD, which is emergency medical dispatch, saving a life over the phone, instructing somebody through CPR, et cetera, et cetera. I could go down that rabbit hole, but I'm not going to. But just back to the communication realm of this, the dispatcher has got to ask the right questions. The caller has got to be calm enough, and that's part of the dispatcher's job, to get them calm, to relay the information that the dispatcher needs, so he or she can get on that keyboard and utilize whatever resources available to them to get them to the scene. Going back to, and I hate to get back on this, is what my friend asked me: what does a dispatcher say when you call 911? What is your emergency? So what people fail to realize in this country, to no fault of them, is when you're calling 911, you truly are the first responder. Me, the deputy, coming to the scene after I've been told what is going on or what they think is going on, I am the emergency responder. So a shift needs to start happening in this country to realize when these people, it takes a lot to call 911. It's not just, oh, hey, how's it going? Just want to let you know a guy got shot over here. You have to build that up. I mean, you're witnessing something. You're being a good witness as a citizen and letting that dispatcher know everything. Sometimes you have to go in and intervene. You may not want to, but you're a good person, and you want to go over here and you want to stop that person from bleeding, and dispatch may walk you through those steps to do that. Well, if you're the only one there and you don't, nobody else is there wearing a uniform doing things, guess what? You're the first responder. Congratulations. So a lot of people don't realize that. And I just wanted to kind of share that. A good friend shared that with me years ago. And each time I speak to somebody, I try to let them know that if you're calling 911 and you're helping people, you're truly a first responder. And thank you for what you do. And I'm that emergency responder that comes there that says, how can I help? If that makes any sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And honestly, I never thought of it that way. I'm actually really glad that you said it that way. I've never, I've had to call 911 a few times myself, and I've never, I figured I was just calling 911. I didn't think I was, the first responder or anything like that. So that's good to know. And I think for anybody listening, it also that communication, like how important it is for what you convey to that dispatcher so that the appropriate action can happen. So I think that's really helpful. So Banning, the other thing I wanted to talk about with you today was I noticed, following you a little bit online, you're doing a lot of training of officers and even people. Can we talk about that a little bit? Like what you're doing as far as training?
Sure. So, I've got my full-time position in law enforcement, and I'll just call it extracurricular activities on my off time. And that's some of that is training law enforcement. I've been blessed enough to receive a 30,000 square foot empty building here in Jack County. It was the old county hospital. And I remember when the CEO gave that to me, and I believe it was in 2017, he said, "I'm sorry, Banning, it's a mess in there. Hopefully it'll help you with if you guys are needing an office or whatnot." And when we went in there, it kind of reminded me of something out of the movies. If somebody was trying to recreate and I hate to think of this word, but a school shooting or a shooting in a hospital, there was dust on the floor, desks were kicked over, wires were pulled out of the walls. All that means is they moved from an old building. They moved into a new building. They left some stuff that they didn't need, and the hospital still owned it, so they weren't in a hurry of getting some things out. And I loved it. We left it exactly how it was. We were able to set up one of the wings like a school, another wing like a church, and for some different training, we set it up in another way that I'm not really going to go into on video, just to prepare people for bad situations. And one of the things I do is in the Lone Star State here in Texas, the governor has helped tremendously in this, is getting the teachers, ones that can psychologically, physically, and are willing to volunteer. We will arm the teacher if they go through the correct training. So I've got a company that does that, participates in that, whatever you want to talk about. And we've worked with several districts across the state. I'm not going to go into the districts that we work with, but all we essentially do, and the instructors essentially do, is make sure that male or female teacher that's going to be with our next generation is capable of handling a firearm. After they've gone through mental screenings, they come to us, and not everybody makes it through the training. I mean, we treat these teachers as we do law enforcement. So we're going to make sure that they can handle themselves on the range. And then we go to what I was telling you, the hospital, and go through a ton of scenarios to make sure that they can truly protect our next generation. And there's been some in training to where in the beginning they started this long process thinking that they're the ones that are meant to do this. And once we put them into a stress test or a real life scenario, they look at me and say, I am not the one that's meant to. And I would prefer that to occur in training than when we deploy them back in their schools and they're doing something I can't do. And I appreciate the heck out of teachers is teaching the next generation. And if the cucka hits the fan, so to speak, they're going to be able to protect the next generation. So we put them through a lot of drills, and that's some of the things that Banning does on the side for training.
And I think I know I read that you did that, and I thought that was fantastic, because I've always thought about that. And obviously when you hear these tragic situations, you can't help but think, if that was your child, if you were a teacher in that situation, how would you react?
Sure.
So Banning, I know part of it, obviously a lot of people will probably hear this and think they hear firearms right away with teachers. I guess though, I would suspect that there's more to it than that, right? There's probably like more tactical awareness, maybe, that I'll call it, that maybe can, if they're able to your point, breathe, get themselves thinking right? Maybe it doesn't even come to that. Maybe they're able to protect in a way before they even have to, use the firearm. So is that part of it also?
There is. So, not to expose the tactical readiness of our teachers in the state of Texas, and every district, and that's what's great. It's an ISD, so it's an independent district. They can incorporate whatever training that they see fit for their campuses within their control. So a lot of the ones that we work with, the armed teachers are using that gun in a last ditch effort of, you've cornered us, you're not hurting these kids, I'm a mama bear, papa bear of this classroom, you're going down before they are. So there's a lot of other things that go into place before these teachers are going to pull that out in some districts. There's some districts that are very proactive, and at the first sound of, they're going to eliminate that threat, and they initiate the training for it. They train on a regular, they train more than a lot of law enforcement agencies do. And I applaud the heck of them for that. This means that a lot of times in the state of Texas, they're not getting paid any extra to carry that gun and take that oath, if you will, to protect these kids. And they're doing it on a voluntary basis. So what does that mean? Well, they're buying, some districts have enough money to be able to give them money for rounds. Obviously, ammunition has gone up. It's kind of like the stock market. It gets expensive. It goes up and down. But they're out there on their off time. I've had many North Texas teachers reach out to me knowing that I have access to different ranges in the area, and they just want to pick my brain while they're shooting on the firing line and maybe get a couple scenarios thrown at them. But these are truly heroes. I mean, they're willing to go through college and teach our next generation at next to nothing for salary, and then put added, vicarious liability on themselves to carry a firearm, because we can't just go to school and be half awake knowing that we have a firearm on us or in a safe location in the school, because it can fall into the wrong hands. So props to them for that.
Yeah, I applaud them, and I applaud you, because I just think, obviously not just teaching our next generation. If as parents we're not there, we're hoping that there's somebody there to help protect them if God forbid the situation presents itself. Well, I think that's amazing work that you're doing, Banning. And I really, I'm really, really happy that we got a chance to talk today. The last thing I wanted to talk about was, and what first drew me to you was, you have on your social media on LinkedIn, you mentioned something about you're teaching people how to smile at life. And I see everything you're doing. It's so positive, man. Like obviously you're in an extremely stressful job. but you're really able to still keep this positive like mindset and put out this positivity. Is that, I mean, are you really trying hard to do that, or does it just come naturally?
It didn't come naturally for years. And this job, I retired from a larger agency down in the Dallas Fort Worth area, and I would find myself coming home to my wife, who is a 911 dispatcher.
Mm.
And I'm like, man, it's just such a horrible night. It may be 6 a.m. I just got off of work, but I'm going to go to the beer, and I'm going to go to the fridge and get a beer, or I'm going to, because I don't want to think about what happened last night, and I don't want to talk to my wife about it because I don't want to get her sad. And then throughout the years of learning, I finally started realizing when I come home and speak to my wife, who also has a stressful job. I'm glad that she's retired from it now, to be a full-time mom and take care of family and whatnot. But coming home and speaking about things it's almost like going to a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I talk a lot about mental health, and these guys and gals across this country are not taking care of their mental health. And I'm a huge supporter of that. Smile at life. So it's, you have options. You can be very sad at all the thousands of situations that you've seen, or to me, I mean, I'm not afraid to say it, but I'm a believer in the man upstairs. And I'm not afraid to say that he puts you in different situations because he knows that you can handle it. That may be a situation that you're not going to walk away from. But guess what? As a law enforcement officer, you are expendable. It's very sad, but you are there to protect lives. And sometimes when you protect lives, your life ends. Mm-hmm. So why go out of this world if it's your time upset, depressed? I wake up every day proud that the three of my children have 10 fingers and 10 toes, and there's nothing seriously medically wrong with them. My oldest just got his driver's license, and I just gave him my old truck. I'm sitting back protecting other people's families, and then I get to come home and watch my family grow as well. So going back to mindset, what mindset, if I'm, back in my 20s and 30s when I first started this thing, the doctors were telling me, hey, your blood pressure's high. Your heart rate is elevated more than it should be for a 28-year-old. You're borderline this disease, you're borderline that disease. And I was constant grump, frown. I figured I had to, if I'm a police officer, I've got to put on that meat mugging face. It just took years to realize we're human beings. People are slowly starting to accept us as human beings. And when we come to a situation, if we greet somebody with a smile, you're going to de-escalate that situation a lot better, because whatever they're going through in their life, it's bad enough to call the police. We have to realize that's human. They're asking for help. Why come there with why did you call 911? What's going on? Yada, yada, yada. Come there with a smile. How can I help you? It comes back to customer support and hey, how would we want our family members treated if law enforcement or first responders came? So I'm glad you brought that up, because I get I'm on LinkedIn, and then those that are on LinkedIn watching this and through YouTube or whatever platform you put it on, if it takes me a while to get back to you, I'm getting close to 3,000 messages a day. And I'd say about 1,500 of those are related to, how do you smile so much? How are you handling life so well? It goes back to that mindset. We have a choice on how we want to present ourselves in public. And you'll notice if you smile a lot more out there, you're going to get a lot of smiles back, and stress levels come down, blood pressure comes down, and you're helping the entire room, not just yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm sitting here as you're talking about, and I can feel my face is hurting from smiling. So that's a good thing.
Outstanding.
That's awesome, man. So, the last thing I said the last thing before, but honestly, this is the last thing. But when you mentioned it, I did want to give you a chance to say this. I think mental health, it's so important, especially with law enforcement, stressful jobs. Banning, what do you say to those people who are, what I say, potentially suffering in silence? They think they're broken and they don't want to come forward or reach out for help. I mean, what do you say to them in order to maybe get them to speak to someone or come out?
Sure. There's a ton of organizations out there that these first responders won't have to pay for. And I typically don't advertise them, but I'm impressed with one right now that I've sent a lot of folks to, and it's called the Wounded Blue. The gentleman named Randy Sutton, that's the founder of it. He's out of Las Vegas. He was a Las Vegas Metro police officer out there. And I'm so impressed with how they're running that organization. I'm going to kind of give them some props. So these law enforcement guys, first responders, even military, and I know military has a ton of resources out there, and first responders are just now getting it. But you have got to talk to somebody. If you start feeling that, I'm not going to call it blue, man. If you're going home and you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to hurt somebody else, get on LinkedIn, reach out to me. I'll put you direct. I mean, I will have you in contact with somebody within just a few short minutes, and you're going to start seeing your life turn back to normal when you start unpacking what's going on in your head. I've experienced it. I've gotten help. I'm not afraid to tell anybody that. I've seen so many bad things in this to where I've had to go get help because I thought, man, what's this rapid heart rate? Why do I feel this way in public? What's going on here? What's going on there? And once I was able to unpack it and figure out what's going on and got a game plan on how to unpack that stuff for the rest of my life, now I can kind of show people how to do it and shoot them in the right direction for it. So mental health, absolutely the most important thing for law enforcement.
Banning, that's outstanding. And I think just, obviously this, I'm going to be playing a lot this clip because I think it's a really important. And I think just that last bit you said, I mean, I believe this, especially as men. I think men are less likely to mention this because they think something's wrong or it's not macho. I mean,
sure.
To see a man like you openly willing to admit it and talk about it, and then, trying to help others with it, I think it's fantastic. So, Banning, thank you so much. It's been an honor to have you on today. I really appreciate you coming on today. I hope this helps a lot of people, and I think it shows, like, you guys, most police officers, law enforcement, they're out there, they're human just like the rest of us. They're out there trying to help. And like Banning said, their job isn't to hurt, it's to help. And I think they need our support. So everyone, please support our police. And Banning, thank you again.
Hey, thanks, brother. I appreciate you having me on, and we'll definitely have to do it again sometime.
Sounds good to me. Well, thanks everybody for watching, and keep up with Banning. I'll put some links in the notes where you can check them out on social media. And
this has been the Bear Essentials. Thanks for listening. And remember, never hibernate on your goals.